Hello, hello, everybody. How y'all doing? Me, I'm doing good. Unfortunately, I have been having technical difficulties.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Finding Your Inner Peace and Tranquility. I'm your host, Goddess Asha Mariama. Thank you guys for joining me for this episode. I have Miss Barbara. She is an international peace activist, an award-winning author, a composer, and a performer. She also has a workshop and a facilitator. She has authored 6 books on metaphysics about her research. She's a a psychic channel who works very well with people called Party. And she also deals with conflict resolution. Hi, Miss Barbara.
Hello, Asha. Thanks for having me. And
It's
it's revolution, conflict revolution, but we'll get to that.
Well, tell me a little bit about you.
I started my journey in music. That was my first love. I started writing music when I was 12 and singing my original stuff. So that process, because obviously music is very intuitive, especially writing music, opened me up to the possibility of being a psychic channel. And I knew what that was. I had read some Edgar Cayce when I was growing up and Jane Roberts and such. And I had a friend of mine's mom. She used to give us readings. We didn't think of her even as a psychic, I guess. She just would tell us the most beautiful things about our lives and how to live better lives. It was much more like Jesus talking, about love and compassion. But anyway, that's how I started on the psychic road about 1987. I discovered I could automatic write some really beautiful messages, and it all kind of sprung from there.
So it's kind of like one of those things where you just said, you know what, I've done music and I've lived this fulfilling life. And one day you said, you know what, I want to take what I learned from the lady you had talked to, and now I want to incorporate something of your own because she got you to see your abilities through hers.
Not exactly, though.
Okay.
I did not ever make any kind of conscious decision to do it. I only ever wanted to be a rock star in my life. So I was on the road for 15 years. And when I started this automatic writing, it was kind of a shock to me that, I mean, I knew what it was, but it was like, well, what is this? And who are you? And the answer was sound. I didn't know what that meant, but I worked in sound for so long. So as long as I can remember, I was kind of okay with it. And it was more like a mission that I apparently came here to do that I wasn't quite aware of back then. And I had to be slowly but surely introduced to what this pathway was because I wanted to go the other way.
Okay. You sound like me. I was little, and I remember when somebody kept telling me I have the ability to see things before they happen. And I never wanted to believe it. And it was one of those things I always was afraid of it. And I remember I was dating somebody and we were having problems, and I had invited all of them to go to the beach, and they didn't want to go at first. And then one day they just all showed up. And I said, well, why are y'all here? They was like, well, you said you were going to pay for it. I said, that's when I asked you. You didn't want to come. So the whole time they were here, they didn't spend any time with me, which told me that if I'd have paid for that trip, I'd have been by myself. So I got all of them together and I just started telling them these premonitions that just were in my head. And they all came to pass. Like one guy, I told him the last thing his mother ever said to him and his siblings. And they broke down crying. I didn't know this woman. And then another friend of mine, I said, your boyfriend's gonna have a baby in 7 years. And when you find out, it's gonna be the worst way possible. She called me the day after She said, you remember 7 years ago you told me that my boyfriend was gonna have another baby? I said, yeah, it happened. She came to the door. I said, oh. So now she always asks me, is there anything that you see? I said, I see a lot of things, but when you try to tell people things, they don't believe you. And then when they happen, it comes back to them and like, I remember you telling me that. I said, yeah.
And yet, how can we, we just have to follow our intuition and let time unfold with it. But I think it's interesting that you had this sort of little bit of a conflict. They didn't come the first time, and then they came and they expect this. And I think there's something in that space where there's like an emotional opening, like a conflict or something. Because it was for me too, when I was writing this letter to my friend telling her how bad it was to make judgments. Just being super self-righteous and, trying to bait the conflict. And suddenly what was coming out of my mouth was not at all what I was thinking. And it was much higher in compassion and understanding and etc. So it's a mysterious gift.
It is. And then some people were like, well, there's no such thing. I said, some people have a gift. I remember there was one lady in 2018. I had just was in a car in 2018. I couldn't drive. I was just talked about Adam and Eve and talked about it from a different perspective. Hit the back of my neck in the car, was on my way home, had a panic attack. And I kept saying it's nothing. Then I had to pull over, stop for a second. I said, well, if it get worse in the morning, I'll go to the hospital. Got up, I was fine. Got in the car, I couldn't drive. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't drive. And then one day I realized at that time, I said, nobody's here for me. And I was the person that was the people pleaser. I was the one that was always there for everybody else. But then when that happened, nobody would take me where I needed to go. I couldn't get anywhere. And I had to get to an interview. I had just lost my job. And I said, I gotta get up. I gotta do this. So I kept saying in the car out loud, I said, I gotta get there, gotta get there. I said, look, I told my body, I said, look, we gotta get there. And even though I was scared to get in the car and drive, I drove 45 minutes. But the only way back, it was just so smooth. But it was just that starting point. And I was like, I realized they tell you you shouldn't talk to yourself. I said, well, actually, learning from that experience, you should, because your body doesn't know what your mind is thinking. Your body reacts. And if the mind doesn't talk to the body and you don't put into the universe what it is you want to do, where you want to go, then it's just still stuck in your head, because they always say when you take tests, you're in silence. And I said, well, there's a lot of people that can't pass a test because they can't read out loud the question to be able to think it through vocally so it makes sense, because it's in your head. And so when that happened to me, I said, well, now when I get in the car, I said, look, we have to get here. We're gonna come back and we're gonna be okay. And he says sometimes the mind will want to do something and the body's like, I don't want to do it. And the mind has to convince the body, but because even though you have nerve systems and the body sends signals, because your mind is so thinking of other things, you're not thinking about how your body is impacted by what the mind and the decisions and the actions and behaviors do. So I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and that's a lot of what we work with in conflict revolution. We really help people understand, we call it this spiritual anatomy, that every day, and it involves the body. The body is the center of intuition, and it involves emotion, which is also in the body, and involves intellect, where our egos and our decision-making processes actually take place. So when intuition tells you to rest, it's not the intuition organically that is causing yourself to make the decisions to rest. That lies in the thinking and the intellectual process. And then, you know as well as I do, oh, I can't rest. I've got this to do and that to do and that to do and that to do. And then suddenly you are off. And so there's a really beautiful balance, I think, that we can achieve that honors the body and the intellect and the emotion. And that's what conflict resolution is all about.
And I love that because I had to learn the emotional intelligence in that same thing because when we have these panic attacks, everybody keep thinking they're just emotional. I said, no, physical's the last part because some people have that emotional intelligence. But because physically we're not seeing the damage that we do from the choices and decisions that we make, and then we act on it. Like if like somebody said the power of the tongue. I said, well, the power of the tongue only affects you if you allow it to. It's like somebody saying, you're not good enough, you're not worthy. Then you just pretty much believe what that person told you. So then your whole entire life you believe, I'm not good enough because your parents told you that. And then somebody you love is telling you the same thing. And you're like, well, maybe it's me. And I was like, no, you didn't fail because you dated this person. You didn't fail. They did. They failed you. You did everything that you were supposed to do. It's just with conflict, you have to learn how, no matter how much you love somebody, you got to protect you. And sometimes God will pull you from the world and pull you from everybody because you're being destroyed by it. And I learned now that if somebody tells me that ain't where I'm supposed to be, then that's not where I'm supposed to be. If that's not what I'm supposed to do, then that's not what I'm supposed to do. But it took, like you said, trusting my instincts, trusting myself, and saying no. But I also realized all of these things medically forever changed me mentally. So now I can feel everything because I opened my third eye. And when I open my third eye, I can feel everything from my body. So now I know when something's wrong. I know, okay, I know I'm not supposed to be doing this because I know how this affects my body and how it's going to make me feel. So having that conflict and that resolution of, okay, this doesn't just affect my mind. This doesn't just affect my emotions. This affects my finances, my relationships. It affects everything. And I had to learn how to deal with all of that.
And that indeed the journey of everybody's life. And focus is mine were certainly horrible and traumatic. But they get imprinted in our own thinking process. So we can be, and if we have those imprints of thinking on it enough, which are usually tied to an emotion of fear, or we people ourselves come and mirror that part of our thinking process for us to see. And like you said, we all did. We had a spiritual journey where we had to get a hold of our thinking, our ego, our decision making, how we deal with emotion, how to deal with body. And like you're talking about, we put in the learn these spiritual organs when they have actual physical places that you associate. Because so many times we have an emotion that comes up and it triggers thought, and it's like all one thing. But when we pull them apart and say, okay, there's emotional component, there's intellectual description, and then here in the intuition, there's going to be this impelling to really tell us what's the best thing to do. And the challenge is and then act. I think that's paradox of humanity's gifts. We've been given free will.
I hear a lot of people talking nowadays with the Republicans and all of these things, and everybody's like, well, they're trying to bring back all these things. That's because when you're dealing with negativity, negativity doesn't like change. Negativity doesn't like growth. Negativity doesn't like evolution. So anytime negativity, the first it's going to try to do is try to get you to do something willingly. We don't do it willingly, then it's going to try to manipulate, bamboozle, and lead you astray and lie to you. Then it's going to force you to. And so when you see stuff like this, I tell people it's all a stage. Like, for example, if somebody, says something like when I was a kid, I remember when me and my dad were having a conversation, and this was like a year ago, and we were talking about my son, and I was trying to explain something to him. And I said, no, I hear what you're saying. I said, it's not even about right or wrong. I said, about coming to a understanding and a conclusion to fix the problem. The way you think is not wrong, the way I think is not wrong. As long as we both learn something from each other, then the conversation will be better. As long as you understand the way that I say things and you say things, then we get a better understanding. But if you're always trying to be right, I said, Dad, then that means you're not open to anything new and to learn something new. And so when I said that, our relationship has been better because he now understands that, yes, I'm your daughter, but I'm also an adult. And I'm not that little girl that, didn't trust your judgment. I said, I learned a lot from you. I learn a lot from you now. I said, but I am just in a new generation of doing things differently. But doesn't mean that what you do doesn't work. Doesn't mean that what I do is wrong either. We're just in different generations. And he was like, never thought about it like that.
But when we speak up and articulate ourselves in compassion, and what you were saying was very compassionate, plus that's a lot of what the work we do, where we say, do you want to be right? Or do you want to find a creative solution that's for the good of everything? Because those are two different skill sets. Because we can spend all day long talking about an issue, trying to prove that you're right and trying to prove that he's right or me right. We can do that. Or we can admit that we're all a mirror of each other and God's children, and we're here to find creative solutions together and to work for the good of all. And that's a conscious decision that, like you just beautifully described, that was your intention when you were in that place with your father, was to do something that was going to be a creative solution. You weren't trying to be right. And I think in the country right now, what helps me is because I'm an investigative reporter. So I have a much deeper idea of what I think is going on, maybe than just the average person who doesn't have the time to really dig. But that's okay. But my thing is, I want to honor people's position. What I can't allow myself to be in is being blamed, being told I'm the problem, being in a situation where somebody is going to absolutely have no idea, the projection doing from their side. And it, unless you want to demonstrate your willingness and capacity to live this way, I think a lot of times they always used to talk about there's this new earth being born, and there's this evolutionary step. And I always thought, I don't know what that means. But I think that's kind of just part of it. I don't hate them. I don't project. I'm not attached, but I want to create this. And this is how we do it. It's hard. It's hard to say no to people, especially if they're relatives.
That's true. And you have a lot of people now that are more so like introverts. And you have people that are extroverts. You have people that are more thinkers. I remember a friend of mine told me, he said, you think too much. I said, no, you think too little. He said, what do you mean? I said, I go to bed thinking, I wake up thinking. I said the reason why the last thing I thought before I went to bed is the first thing I think about when I wake up in the morning. I think about, okay, when I get out here in the world, I don't know what's going to happen when I get in that car. I don't know what's going to happen when I get to the store. I have no idea because everything's unpredictable. You can't predict another person or another individual. Me and my mom were in the car one day. We were at Wendy's getting something to eat when I was visiting family. And the next thing I know, if we saw a car just go really extremely fast and hit another car. And we're like, if we would have pulled out, my mom was like, thank God we didn't pull out. I said, just think about people are so in a rush to get somewhere. And I'm like, you're still gonna get there. Even if you leave an hour early, you're still gonna get there. I said, the only way you won't get there is if you're tired. Even if you're tired, look, you're still gonna get there. You're just gonna be there late. But what is rushing gonna do for you? Like the tortoise and the hare. I tell people all the time, the tortoise and the hare. They were like, what do you mean? I'd rather be the tortoise than the hare. It's like, why? Because when you're speeding, you're not paying attention. You're only seeing what's in front of you. And then you're going so fast that eventually you're going to get tired. And while I'm sitting just looking around, enjoying my environment and having that peace and tranquility, you're in a rush and you don't even realize you're stressing yourself out because of that adrenaline and that dopamine that while you're resting, I'm still moving. So by the time you wake up, I'm almost at the finish line. And I still got there same time you did, just not as quickly.
And you're talking about in conflict resolution, the difference that we teach people between the intellect's job is to do exactly what you're talking about. It's to be in the present moment, pay attention to what's going on over there, listening for intuition, making decisions for the good of your whole system, your body, your everything, as opposed to when you're in your head and you're thinking about where you're going and why you're not there fast enough. And I have to get there faster. And because if I don't do this, that is the greatest kinds of personal conflicts that people have. It's that simple as being in a car, thinking about tomorrow, thinking about yesterday, thinking about your last boyfriend, thinking about this, being, triggered by emotion. And I think a lot of the world operates that way.
They do. It's always, I've got to have things this way. And then you get it, and then you're still not happy with it. And you're staying somewhere because you feel it's obligated. Because I was listening to Jay Shetty yesterday, and he was talking about love. He said love has nothing to do with what someone looks like, going to dinner, going to dates. He said, I don't even know where we got this from. Love is a person that internally respects you as a person. And there's someone that whether they're around you, whether they're not around you, they can never look you in the face knowing that they've hurt you. And I was talking to somebody because we were talking about a situation where a woman went back to a man that slept with her best friend and had a baby. And they said, well, marriage is about, being there through the good times. I said, but y'all don't have a problem with leaving somebody that got cancer. You don't have a problem with leaving somebody because you're not emotionally attracted because they gained 20 pounds. You're okay with somebody leaving because they don't want to be a father or they don't want to be a mother anymore, but you're not okay with somebody going back. But you are okay with somebody going back because they committed infidelity. I said in the Bible, it says that you're not supposed to stay in a marriage or a person commits infidelity or domestic violence. I said, because you're lowering yourself to build somebody else up, which is something we've been raised to do. That I'm raised to lower my intellect, dumb myself down to build somebody else up that's going to leave me to be with someone else. And I'm still stuck here. And then some people say, well, I said, the one thing about negative people they're always going to have somebody to catch them. They'll never fall compared to someone that's a positive person that will hit rock bottom and there's no one to catch them. And they say, why is that? Because the person that hit rock bottom, they were only there for that person for convenience. They were there to be that safety net for that negative person. And so when that negative person falls, there's always going to be somebody to feel sorry for them. Them. There's always going to be over there. That's called build somebody else up. And
I just had conversation with my friend about somebody really wanting way too much from her. What was asking for was just ridiculous, like to put her on her AAA card. So if she got in an accident, she'd be okay. A woman she didn't hardly know. And I thought the hardest thing for us sometimes as good people is to be really authentic. I think being authentic is truly an act of compassion. I'm not talking about being brutally honest, like just saying whatever you think, but to somehow say the difficult things in a loving way. And in her case, she ended up making up a little sort of white lie of why she couldn't do it. And we talked about how would it look differently had you said, I can't take that risk. That's not uncompassionate. That's you just taking care of yourself. Plus, then later, you don't feel bad. You had to make up this little white lie about your mother being on the card and she couldn't do two people or whatever. She would have had a whole different sense of self if she was authentic and loving and saying, I cannot be that person for you. And I hope you find your need and your resource. I'm not that. But these are the tests, the tests of our lives for sure.
they are, especially now I tell people, I said, you have to find somebody evenly yoked to you. And I hear a lot of time on social media when people say, it's about a man being the head and a woman being the neck. I said, do you not understand the neck is the thing that holds the mind and the body together? You're nothing without the neck. If the neck is gone, you're gone. I said, even if the mind is dead, the body still can function and still can breathe as long as you're on a ventilator. But if the neck is gone and somebody hits you in the neck hard enough, you're paralyzed from the bottom up. Why? Because the mind and the body cannot connect because of the neck. It's just like your chakras. If any chakra is damaged, then the mind can't connect to it. It's just like having numbness. I said, some people's like, what do you mean? I said, when I started having chronic pain, I started understanding how pain works. I said, pain is always going to find somewhere to go, no matter what. You can get out of one thing mentally and psychologically go through pain. You can go through mental and psychological learning from that and emotionally go through pain, financially go through pain, relationships go through pain, and physically and internally and externally. And I tell people, I said, the physical is nothing without the internal. And we have all these debates about, well, I could do keto, I can go exercise. I said, you can do all of that, don't lose no weight. Why? Because there are other things internally that have nothing to do with what you ate. It has everything to do with how food is being digested in your system, how your kidneys function. It depends on how your heart beats. But every choice that you make in your external life impacts your internal. So if you make better choices externally for your internal, then you'll make better choices internally, and your internal will thank you for it because you're thinking about, okay, now how can I stop the numbness? How can I lose the weight? Well, I've got to get rid of all of these things that are stressing me out as far as cortisol, insulin, all of those different things. And it's not just what you eat; it's also what you go through in your life.
And I think people's greatest need to learn in culture right now is how to feel feelings, to release them, because we call them abscesses. So every time I was growing up and something happened that I was maybe afraid of, or I got hurt by something and I didn't let myself feel it, it just pushed it down and it started to abscess. And it naturally, it's either going to come out in my body, it's going to come out with mental health, it's going to come out with arguments with people. But we've just never, ever been taught how to healthily, because anger, sadness, anxiety are natural emotions. It's part of living life. You're not bad or wrong. You're not malfunctioning if you have those feelings. But if those feelings are latched onto by these thoughts, like we've been talking about, I'm not good enough, or this person is responsible, and then that creates this whole reality we don't even know we're trapped in. So this self-awareness, like you help people see, and like we help people see, is about stepping back, looking at how our operating system is, and getting to know it. You have a beautiful relationship to your body and to your operating system. I have a beautiful one with mine. And if we sat down for a couple hours in the afternoon with crayons and we're showing each other, we would see that even if you've never heard of anything I've done, our worldviews cross over, like artwork. But that takes being willing to step out and be self-aware.
I agree. And that's something that's important. And that's why when people talk about psychics, they be like, that sounds demonic. I said, no, it's no different than being a prophet. I said, there was Solomon, he was a prophet. And he, went around the world. And you had David, then you had, even with Samson was a man that had the ability of strength. But one woman took him down just by manipulation. I said, for everything, even the most people in the Bible, they weren't perfect. And we had one perfect being, a little bit piece things open. So every time your third eye opens, I said the information is already in your brain. All you do is you go research to see every aspect of that one situation. And you're looking at the negative, you're looking at the positive, and then you're saying, let me weigh the pros and cons of this. Let me think about the consequences and repercussions first before I do anything. Not just going off how it makes me feel, but going off if it's worth me even wasting my time on. I said, because with negative people, they can say something and I'll look at them. I'm like, are you done? Do you feel better now that you said all of this? And they're like, I said, well, you have a good day. And they walk away, and I walk away, and they said, you're not going to be upset? Why? I never wanted to know you in the first place. I never walked up to you and said, what's your name? You just said something that gives me automatically saying to me, I should know you. I said, the old me would have been like trying to convince you that you're a liar. But no matter how many ways I come at this, you already have your mind set. So why am I going to change that? And I think that's something people need to understand, that the minute somebody says something negative, that right is tell you it's time for me to walk away from you. But there's a difference between corrective criticism and somebody talking to you like that. So you have to learn to distinguish the difference of people that want to see you win and the people that make you believe that they want to see you win, they really want to see you lose.
Well, and I think when you take in the whole, like you're saying, the whole, the good, the bad, you get to see the whole picture and you're taking in everything into your body. And that gives your body a chance to be informed and then inform you. It's like, no, or, oh, yeah. And it's almost your thinking process is gathering the information and it's going into your body and your intuition, but ultimately it's your body that's going to tell you what the synopsis, what the end product is. And then again, will you follow or will you? And when people want to be right, then they're going to engage in all that. Oh, I'm not a negative person. It's like, I don't think you have to tell anybody that. You don't have to defend yourself. What we call it is, in basketball, it's a game and it's going and you don't know where that ball is going and you have to pivot just based on where the ball is going in the game. There's a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of things that you can't control. And if I were to like miss the shot or something, or it's not going where I thought it was, if I sat down in the court and went, what was wrong with me that the ball didn't go over there when the whole game would be. So that's how it is in life. We have to pivot. Sometimes the ball's over here. You thought it was supposed to be over there. How are you going to deal with what you have right at hand? And that's the beautiful, I think that's what life is about.
I agree. Because that's the same thing. I look at things. I'm like, well, I lost my job Thursday. And they told me, and they said, well, we're downsizing. I said, well, at least I didn't lose my job because I did something wrong. And it was like, you're taking this mighty well. I said, because there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, you guys made a choice. I have to live with it. And when I got off, and I said, well, what happens now? He said, you get a severance pay. We help you find other jobs. You can reapply. So it's not like you can't reapply for a different position. I said, okay. And my mom said, well, how you're taking this mighty well. I said, because I want to start a business anyway. I said,
Exactly.
I'm podcasting now. This gives me more time to do so. And when I was sitting there for 2 days, I was just sitting there. I didn't do anything. I said, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here. And I just sat there. And I'm just like, I cried because, yeah, I still have bills I got to pay. But then I'm listening to all these rich and wealthy people saying, the one thing about being poor and being rich is that rich people continue to learn. They continue to grow themselves. When they see somebody doing better, they want to learn how this person is doing better. And I thought about that. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take this time because I still have money in the bank. I still can pay my bills. I said, yeah, I'm still going to, still going to find another job. But I said, same time, this time I'm going to build my business. I said, so every time something negative happens to me, I break a chain. And when I was going after a sex code, I remember they tried to put my whole entire life out there. And I sat there one day and just listened. I said, do you not understand that y'all just broke some chains for me? I said, do you know the only thing y'all do is you strip things from me that have been holding me back all these years? Do you know that you just basically were my therapist? I said, because every negative thing you said, it made me have to look into like a mirror. I said, all you are is a mirror. And all you're doing is all the things that have been holding me back for 50, 40 something years at a time. You just broke. Thank you. They're like, what? Thank you. Because now I can walk away from this situation with my head held high. Now I can write a book. It led me to doing life coaching. I said, thank you. It led me to now selling jewelry. Thank you. Because now all the things that my family and people in my past and me being this people pleaser, seat filler, Captain Save-A-Hole, Build-A-Bears and Build-A-Dolls that I was trying to help, me lowering myself Now I can travel by myself and not have to wait for somebody to travel with me. All those fears that I was afraid of, all those insecurities that I have are now gone. Thank you. And some people was like, what? I said, this was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though now he's in jail. I said, it makes it all worth it. He's in jail because of what y'all did to me. And they said, what do you mean? When you hurt a godly person, you destroy a negative person in the same tone. And they was like, what do you mean? Y'all went after him because of the negative things that he did. Y'all went after me because I was a positive person and because I had flaws and imperfections. You thought you could use them as a weapon against me, which in turn hurt him. But guess who's sitting in jail for life plus 10 years? It ain't me. I said, so I got to walk away, even though, yes, I was damaged. We both are damaged, but he's in jail. I still have my freedom. I said, so that is more important than anything you could have done to me or my family or my child. You try to use all these things as a weapon, my son, my child, my job, my landlord. You try to do all of these things. But I'm a woman of God, and God led me into this situation for a reason, got me out of the situation, and I'm still standing. And I'm at the light at the end of the tunnel. And you can't break that at all.
That synopsis of what I think is, I don't know what I would call it. It's just like right living. It's basic. It's the hardest thing to do, especially look at all the things that you just described coming at you with the grace and kind of the humility to say, God is good. God's in charge. I surrender to God and I trust and I embody it. Now, I'm sure you went through a whole myriad of emotions around it. Don't people think that, oh, it was just so easy for you? No, it was really the most difficult work of your life, I'm sure. But staying in that whole idea of compassion, which us taking care of ourselves through our own decision making, I think is the most compassionate thing that a human can do.
Great. Because what I learned from that is I said, I'm not forgiving y'all because of you. I'm forgiving because of me. I said, every tear that I dry, every tear that I cry is me relinquishing all feelings. And a lot of people don't understand it. What do you mean? When you relinquish feelings, regardless if you cry because you're happy or you cry because you're sad, you're relinquishing something. And I said, when I cry, once I stop crying, that's it. I don't confront people until I'm done with my emotions, until I figure out what they are. And then I was looking at something where I learned there's 120 different emotions, negative and positive, and there's 10 levels. And I said, 0 is death. And when you're here in extreme, that still can be kind of a type of death, either way, depending if it's something that is cold or something if it's hot. If it's too cold, you die. If it's too hot, you die. And I said, I learned that I'm 50%. I don't never let it go to a point where it passed that. And people say, why? I said, because then I have some reason to be in the middle and be not, I guess the word nonchalant would be the word I would use. And I said, it's not that I'm not upset. It's not that I'm not angry. But when I approach you, I'm going to be 50% either way. Because I've already dealt with the emotions on my own. I've already sat down and came to terms with what happened. I said, because if I go to you and I'm upset, then my anger is just going to rise even worse. Versus having the even keel to sit down with you, hear what you have to say as to why, and then walk away from you still. And they's like, what do you mean? I said, you didn't have the decency when you did what you did to me to even be honest about it. You didn't think about me when you made the choice that you made to hurt me and then come back and look me in the face knowing you did something wrong. I said, I don't even care about what you took. I don't care about you putting your hands on me, but you don't love me. Point blank, period. And I said, I took the time to cry. I took the time to deal with it because if I would have came to you, you would have used my feelings as a weapon against me to make me think that my intuition is not correct. I took time to process it. I took time to try to look at this in multiple different perspectives. And I came to one. I said, I just wanted to hear if you would lie or if you would tell me the truth. But either way, I'm choosing me because the fact that you hurt me, you'll do it again. And you will continue to do it because I'm allowing you to do it. No, I'm not allowing you to hurt me. So I'm walking away. I would rather walk away with nothing because I can build what I have. I said, but here's a kicker to it all. While you were doing everything that you were doing, I built a safety net. So when I walk away from you, I have a safety net. And I think a lot of people don't understand when somebody says, well, I'll do this for you. No, You always keep your safety net. Don't ever give up your safety net. Because when I hit rock bottom, I said, never again will I ever, ever, ever in life, ever not have a safety net. Especially when you have children. You got to have a safety net. So even though this other person is saying, I'll take care of you, you don't have to work. No, I'll start a business. I'm not going to sit here. And if something happens to you, you leave this earth. I'm not going to be out there homeless. I'm not going to have nowhere to stay. I'm going to have a backup plan. I'm going to take the time to think through and start planning because I don't want to be a person. I'm seeing too many people leave this earth because they didn't have a backup plan or they stayed. I'm like, no, sometimes if you're going to domestic violence, you may have to leave the state. You can't stay in that same city knowing that person that hurt you is still there. So sometimes I would tell my cousin, I said, if you're going through domestic violence, you need to leave the state. You don't need to stay here. I would tell any family member, if your child is going through domestic violence, please don't let them stay there. Because if they stay there, that person still has access. They have a gun. Gun has no name on it. And we've seen this so many times where so many people lost their lives because they stayed in the same environment. And I tell people, environment plays a part too. You have to walk away from it all, not just that person, but also that environment for you to not only feel safe, but you can move forward.
And people, it's so hard to grasp the idea of giving your permission to it because we think that we're doing
Apparently the video went out. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to post it on the channels, but at least you guys got most of the actual content, and I do apologize. There was more, but for some reason I'm having information. But I'm gonna go ahead and end this live now. But I thank y'all for joining me. But I will post the actual video so y'all can see the whole entire thing. But y'all just got the gist of it. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, notification button. And until next time, we'll talk later. Bye, y'all.